Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Katie Nash. I'm the co-chair of this panel. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves, but first just wanted to say thank you for the City of Frederick for supporting this event, and to everyone who has an interest, both here in the audience and also watching online. This will be available online. So anyone watching at home, thank you for your interest. And if you have any questions of anything that you see tonight, you can always ask the panel, members of the panel, and that's available on the City of Frederick website. So again, my name is Katie Nash. I'm the co-chair of the Disadvantaged Business Review panel that has been established by the mayor of the City of Frederick. Information about that panel, how it has been formed, the makeup of the panel is all available via the City of Frederick website. We were formed roughly, I guess it's been about 7 months now. Is that about right? 7 months. Since that time, we've been meeting monthly. We have 3 subcommittees, all of which are public. All of our meetings are public. Our subcommittee meetings are public. You do not need to be a member of the panel to come and be engaged in that meeting, in that discussion. So we encourage everyone at all times to come and get engaged. We've been meeting monthly, and our subcommittee meetings have been meeting monthly, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been learning through our process, and as a sort of fact-finding experiment of what we've been doing and to learn more about what others are doing, that led us to kind of come to this place this evening and know that we needed to have a deeper dive conversation with some experts that are doing this work. So with that, and without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my co-member of the panel to introduce himself.
Alderman Derek Shark for City of Frederick, a member of the DB/MB review panel.
Sue, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Sue Huff, a proud member to be in here. Thank you.
And Willie?
Yes.
When you want to.
Willie Mahone, a member of the panel, also president of the local NAACP.
And Sue, you mind saying your business so everyone knows your company?
Sure. Octavo Designs.
Fantastic. And my name is Jason Lee. I'm with Lee Building Maintenance here in Frederick as well.
Okay. As we get started, I'd like to introduce our special guest panel speakers this evening. We're going to talk a lot about panels, so to this evening's panel, not to be confused with the overall panel. So if we could start here to my immediate right, the person that traveled the longest gets the first introduction. So if you could just tell us your name and the role within your organization, please.
Sure. I'm Courtney Billups. I'm a longtime corporate counsel attorney that also did a lot of consulting with state and local governments in the area of small and disadvantaged business utilization. I'm former director of the Office of Minority Business Enterprise for the State Health Department, which was the state's largest agency. In my current capacity, I serve as chief of the Minority and Women's Business Opportunity Office with the City of Baltimore Department of Law.
Thank you, sir. Sir?
Yes, good evening. My name is Jerome Maultsby. I am the Assistant Director, Office of Small Business Programs at the United States Army MEDCOM, currently servicing the United States Army Medical Research and Material Command and the United States Army Medical Research Acquisition Activity. Both are located on Fort Detrick, Maryland. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So just a little bit about format, and we're going to get right into it. The purpose of this evening, it was sort of spurned out of 2 committees, our subcommittees, one being the Outreach Committee, which Alderman Shackelford heads, and one being the Infrastructure Committee subcommittee, which Jason heads. And so part of our early discussion led us to, as I mentioned, understand that we needed to bring some outside help in to have a conversation, and we felt that it would be appropriate to have that conversation in public so that everyone had an opportunity to weigh in if you'd like. And again, if you're watching from home, please consider coming to a meeting or sending us questions or comments and feedback via email. So just a little bit about format. We have some questions that we've prepared that we're going to go through very briefly. It won't be a very long evening, I promise. And then certainly there will be opportunity for public engagement for the folks that are here. If you think of a question or you have a comment or some feedback that you'd like to share, you're certainly going to be welcome to do that at the end of our couple of questions that we've prepared. And I just wanted to take one more sort of note here and just thank publicly the City of Frederick staff. I know I mentioned thank you for them being here this evening, but certainly throughout this process, specifically our procurement staff with Keisha, and she's here this evening. You can't see her if you're at home, but she is here, here on her own time this evening. But these folks have been nothing but supportive and completely transparent in our fact finding and what we've been trying to learn. So certainly we thank them for that continued support. So leading off for our first question, I think we wanted sort of a brief overview as we moved forward before we got too far in. We were looking for sort of a brief overview of your program, your local initiative, and we were looking for maybe an example of a challenge that you faced or something that you've sort of seen as an opportunity for growth that you could share with us this evening as we look at the same for our internal program here in the city of Frederick. So whoever would like to start.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for everyone that had a hand in organizing this particular event. I know it's very important. And I'm here not only to provide information, but I'm also here to learn. Again, I represent the United States Army Small Business Programs, and I'm excited about having an opportunity after my normal duty hours to come out, to listen attentively, to provide some information, and hopefully to walk away with a better understanding of some of your challenges. And I hope that the information I provide today, this evening, will enable you and empower you to be more active as far as in organizing events and the way forward for the future. So with that being said, I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and I would like to go through that very quickly. You have a copy in front of you, you should, and I also have a business card. The websites that I will make reference to this evening are located on my business card. There's a QR code also on my business card, and that QR code is a direct link into the headquarters, United States Army Medical Research Material Command, that is commanded by Major General Barbara Holcomb. So I try to embrace the new technology, and hopefully that information is good. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me. I'll try to stay on track and be mindful that I'm one of the individuals here providing information. So with that being said, I'll go to the first chart. In terms of my roles and responsibilities, I won't read this off verbatim. In my role as assistant director in the office, we focus on being an advocate and coordinating very closely with our procurement workforce. We have a number of individuals to include the Commanding General, her primary staff. We have customers that have requirements, and we have the acquisition workforce to include contractor officers, specialists, and more importantly, we advocate that there are many reputable, relevant, responsive businesses, small businesses especially, that can fulfill many of the mission requirements within the United States Army, and as a prime contractor or as a subcontractor. So I look at the role of our office as being an advocate for many of the small businesses, whether they're here in the state of Maryland or outside the state of Maryland. And in addition to that, just for clarification, many individuals say, well, you're a small business advocate. Can you guarantee that a minority or disadvantaged business firm can receive an award? And of course, I think very slowly about that question. I said, well, we want you to compete. That's a key term. We want you to compete for awards. And after the award is consummated, the challenge is making sure you can execute and perform the task in accordance with the terms and conditions of that contract. So in many respects, winning the award is fine. That's first and foremost. Everybody's to be congratulated for the due diligence and the time and effort spent in preparing for the proposals. But oftentimes the real challenge for small businesses, can you perform and can you execute in accordance with the terms and conditions of the contract? And when things go awry, because oftentimes they do, there's large and small businesses, what is your plan? What is your strategic communication plan to contact the contracting officer or the person that you're responsible to provide those services? And that's what we try to focus in on our office as the advocacy role. Next chart, please. I just want to provide this information because this may come up. And I'm going to just go over this very quickly. This information is also on the website. So every fiscal year, in terms of being transparent to our internal and external stakeholders, we provide as far as a listing of our small business targets and goals. And what you see here is our fiscal year 18, which you just finished, and we're in fiscal year 19, our particular targets in the various categories of small businesses. Next chart, please. And the information in this next chart represents our achievements. So at the end of the fiscal year, we did very well in terms of meeting, in certain instances, exceeding our overall small business goals. We had a target of 42%, and as you read in that particular chart, you'll see that we were able to achieve approximately 51%. Every year is a challenge, so the better we do every year, people come and say, oh, you hit 51, next year make it 55, and of course we always look at what's on the horizon in terms of anticipated requirements, the funding, the budget. So there's a lot of other factors that come into place, but I included this here primarily to let you know that as an organization in the United States Army, we are working very diligent to being transparent, whether it's at a function, a conference, a particular panel like today. And again, that information is prominently displayed on the website and for everyone to see, the general public. And hopefully when they see these numbers, they say, well, you know, I'm a small business, maybe there's an opportunity for me. And again, we certainly want to encourage you to consider doing business with us. Next chart, please. So here's the statement that was provided as we launch into, as far as providing some answers to the questions, if that's fine. And I had a chance to review that, and I want to provide as far as my answers with that in mind. Next chart, please. So this is the first question, if I have it right, and if I can, or do you want me to wait?
Could I
Sure.
ask you to wait just a minute?
I sure can.
I just want to let our other panelists give an overview of his program.
Okay,
if that's
fine, sure, definitely.
As the Army is always prepared and ready, so we very much appreciate that. If you wouldn't mind, sir.
Sure. Again, Courtney Billups, Chief of the Minority Women's Business Opportunity Office, the City of Baltimore Department of Law. My office is charged with overseeing the city's Minority Women's Business Enterprise Program. The City of Baltimore has a 27% MBE goal and a separate 10% WBE goal. The state has an overall 29% goal, but they count MBEs and WBEs as one category. City of Baltimore, we set two separate distinct goals on each contract. The goals are determined on a contract-by-contract basis. In other words, we don't put 27 and 10 on every contract. Sometimes the contract goals are higher. I've got a number of construction contracts that are 36 and 13, 37 and 12, 49% MBWB subcontracting. And the truth be told, the only reason why they're not hired is per our green book, which is a guide for construction. For construction, architecture, engineering contracts, the prime contractor has to perform 51%. But we've got the availability where there could be actually higher subcontracting goals, by law we're precluded from doing that. So that being said, we also have contracts that have no goals on them. For instance, commodities contracts. So we determine basically what can be subcontracted out of a scope of work on a particular contract. And out of those segmentable portions of scope of work that could be performed by MB or WB subcontractor, we look at our availability. That is our number of certified firms versus the total firms that are registered with us to do business. And we come up with a number. And that number, again, go anywhere from 36 and 12, 15 and 5, 5 and 5. We set goals on a contract-by-contract basis. The other great opportunity for small businesses with the city is through private development. My office is responsible for seeing private development. I think some of you may be familiar with the Port Covington project. That's a 250-acre development, will probably be between $700 million and $1 billion over the next 15 to 20 years. So for private development, we look at the discretionary portion of that budget. So we'll pull out permits, fees, anything that the developer doesn't have discretion on. And what's remaining, we put a 27% MBE goal on and a 10% WBE goal. The Exelon building, I think we did almost $50 million in MBE contracting and probably around $15 to $20 million in WBE contracting. So in addition to public procurement, we also, if the city provides funding or benefit in excess of $50,000, the MBEW requirements kick in. So not just in public procurement, but in private development projects, which are tremendous projects we have in the city of Baltimore. We also have tremendous opportunities for minority women's subcontracting goals. My also is also responsible for certification. We do not accept the Maryland Department of Transportation certification. We by code, have our own certification process. Very similar to the state of Maryland, but you have to be certified with the city of Baltimore in order to be counted towards an MB or WB goal. So that's the other tranche that my office is responsible for, making sure the folks who are certified with us are duly certified MBs and WBs with not only just the ownership, but operational and managerial control. And then the last piece is really compliance, making sure that the city of Baltimore and its agencies, the prime contractors, and MB and W subcontractors are compliant with the law. And that is ultimately our responsibility to make sure that all those actors are, working in comport with the law to make sure that this program is not only compliant, but successful and effective. And I feel very confident the program is one of the most robust in the country. We're the most efficient certifying agency in the country at this point. And we are probably around 21% MBE on an annual basis and around 6% WBE. But at the rate we're going with some of the private development projects and some of the initiatives that we've had in the last year or two, I expect those numbers to tick up as they have every year since I've been there.
So part of the reason I asked that this be taped is so that I could go back and watch it over and over again and become smarter. So thank you, because I just feel like that was a lot of information very quickly. That was amazing. So Willie, would you mind asking your question, or Sue, did you have?
I actually have a quick question. Can I ask why you don't accept the Maryland, the certified status from the Maryland Department?
Sure, and that question has been around for years. Essentially, when you have a race-conscious program, there are certain parameters. I mean, from an equal protection standpoint, if you use race as a factor, that program there's a compelling governmental interest, and remedying past discrimination is undoubtedly a compelling governmental interest. The second prong of the strict scrutiny analysis is that it must be narrowly tailored. It must be narrowly tailored. There's a Supreme Court decision in 1989, Richmond versus Croson, and they struck down the City of Richmond's program. It really changed the landscape when it came to state and local programs. The 14th Amendment says no state shall discriminate based on race. So when you use race as a factor, it has to be narrowly tailored. And one of the fatal flaws, or several of the fatal flaws in the Richmond program that were identified, which kind of changed the way these programs are administered, the goal in the City of Richmond was based on the population. Population of, when asked, Justice O'Connor wrote the opinion, when asked, why is the goal 30%? Because the population of Richmond is 30% African American. Well, that has nothing to do with contracting. It has nothing to do with the availability of firms. So that was the first flaw. It was overly broad, was not nearly tailored. It also included Eskimos and Aleuts, because it really mirrored the federal legislation, which include Eskimos and Aleuts. And I think in Justice O'Connor's opinion, she said, not only is there not a history of discrimination against Eskimos and Aleuts in public contracting in the city of Richmond, there doesn't appear to be much of a history of Eskimos and Aleuts in the city of Richmond. So once again, overly broad, it was struck down. And as a result of that, state and local programs across the country were either enjoined by court order, they were voluntarily dismantled, or they lost in court. And since then, what jurisdictions have been compelled to do is a disparity study. And your disparity study essentially is your factual predicate or your basis for having a race-conscious program. It looks at availability in the marketplace, it looks at the procurement data at the jurisdiction, and determines is the availability comport with the opportunities. And hence, when there's a disparity, you can have the remedial action of a race-conscious minority business program. The state of Maryland has a national marketplace. It procures goods and services from across the country. It was determined from our last disparity study, the city of Baltimore's marketplace is primarily Baltimore City and the 6 surrounding counties. So therefore, that program is tailored to the Baltimore market area. In other words, the city of Baltimore can't redress discrimination in public contracting to an Asian in Minneapolis or a Latino in Los Angeles. It has to be directed strictly to the folks who have been denied opportunities in the past. So that's why we're limited to the Baltimore market area. However, last year, I started a new initiative. We now have a reciprocal certification affidavit from Maryland Department of Transportation certified firms. When the new Mayor Pugh came in, she said, well, why can't we accept MDOT certification? I explained to her, legally we can't. And her exact words were, that sucks. and I said, I've been talking about it for years. So I said, why don't we do this? What if we call the Maryland Department of Transportation database and identify all the firms who are located in Baltimore City and the 6 surrounding counties that are not certified with us? And we did. I drafted a 1-page Maryland reciprocal affidavit. That your MDOT certification letter, your last federal tax return, and that's all that's required. So we emailed all those folks their affidavits. So if you are in the Baltimore market area and already certified with MDOT, we can do a one-page reciprocal affidavit for you, and has resulted in probably about a 15% spike in our database of firms.
Very good.
That's great.
Very good.
I have
You're
a
right.
pat question that I'm supposed to ask you,
You
but,
are supposed to ask that question,
pardon me?
and then you can add on to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead and ask that
Yes,
one.
please.
Thank you, thank you. But before that, you were talking about using the 6 surrounding counties. Was that your metropolitan statistical area?
That's correct.
Okay, and that concept there.
That's correct.
Okay, okay, my pat question is this. Prior to the start of each fiscal year and based upon historical data, is that it? One of our, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. I want to ad-lib. And what it says is that we have been involved in a lot of data collection, and if you can give us some idea as to what role data collection played in devising your program and enforcing your program.
Well, it's the basis. I mean, essentially, the disparity study is your factual predicate that allows you to enact and implement a program such as this. Without it, that program would not be constitutionally sound, would not be constitutionally defensible. So, in theory, at the current time, if the city of Baltimore for 5 years were to meet its target goal, meet its target goal of 27 and 10, that program would no longer likely be constitutional because we've actually reached that parity in the marketplace. So your disparity study, your data, that factual predicate is the basis to have a constitutionally defensible minority business program. Now that is a little bit different when you have a race-neutral program. For instance, small business reserve, DBE programs that are race-neutral. It doesn't rise to the same level of strict scrutiny that a race-conscious program would have, but obviously the data is what's necessary to justify having a race-conscious program.
Thank you.
Now you're on.
Thank you so much. So in terms of the United States Army, and more specifically within the United States Army Medical Research Material Command, the goals are established by higher headquarters, and higher headquarters being Department of Army and Department of Defense. So every fiscal year, they look at historical data, and they look at those individual organizations. So as an example, on one of my previous charts I showed or displayed the targets for that particular fiscal year, fiscal year 18, as an example. The targets, we'll say for an example, for overall small business was 42%. And as an organization, we'll say the Medical Research Material Command, they say, well, how did you come up with 42%? Well, again, they look at historical data from the previous fiscal years. They also look at other factors such as, the spend rate, the budget, what's on the horizon in terms of procurements for that particular fiscal year. And they say, well, based upon those factors and others, they say, well, we think the 42% target or stretch goal can be achieved based upon what has occurred as far as in the past. So with the various categories: small business, small disadvantaged business, women-owned small business, service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, and historically underutilized business zones, more commonly referred to as hub zones. So all those particular categories are what we report on. However, we also collect data on veteran-owned small businesses, as well as Small Business Administration 8A program. And that information is publicly available through various websites. I think on one of my previous charts I have the reference Federal Procurement Data Systems, Next Generation FPDS-NG. That information can be downloaded. It gives, it allows the transparency, so you can see exactly for a particular organization how well they're doing, or some of the challenges that they may encounter over a period of time. So what I have here on the chart in terms of the answer to that particular question, I have some information regarding internal stakeholders, and that's within the Department of Army, as well as external stakeholders, and those are the individuals, many of you are here today. And if I can just look at my notes here, as far as on the internal stakeholders, again, prior to the fiscal year, we'll say as an example, fiscal year started 1 October. Behind the scenes, our office is working very closely with the acquisition activity and to publish a forecast. And for definition purposes, an acquisition forecast is a projection of planned procurements. It doesn't constitute as far as a request for information or a request for proposal. It gives the general public an idea of what's on the horizon for that particular organization. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a Title V of Public Law 10656 that states that all federal agencies provide that forecast. And for us within the Department of the Army, we're responsible for providing that and publicizing that forecast within 60 days of each fiscal year. And if you were to go into the QR code or the websites that's listed on my business card, you'll see on the homepage, on the bottom right-hand portion under Major General Holcomb's photo, there's fiscal year 19 acquisition forecast in the parentheses pending. So as we're speaking, we're shooting for to have that published on around the week of the 19th of November. And we've been very successful in having a forecast published every year, I think with the exception of 1 year for over like 10 years, because we understand from a data collection standpoint, that information will give you as a small business owner, or perhaps looking to partner with a large firm, some information. Say, okay, we see what's on the horizon, we have a point of contact, just some very general information in terms of approximate dollar value of the contract. And then that gives you an opportunity to kind of determine whether or not you're going to go after that individually, or to partner or collaborate with another small business, a large business, or you say, you know what, that's more than I can handle. I'm gonna pass on that and go to another agency. And that's what we try to do internally. External stakeholders, again, really, really important. A lot of people say, well, I feel like it's a challenge to access the information in real time, either going on an installation because of ID, visitor gate, all the things that we see now that are pretty prominent in any federal agencies. And many of the small businesses say, you know what, I'm not really feeling it in terms of trying to get in. And I think it's I call it the secret sauce or code. What do I need to do? And what the Army is doing, they're trying to do a better job through outreach sessions. This is, I consider, an outreach session to help encourage and empower the small businesses to say, this is where you can find the information. Don't feel intimidated. If you're one of the few in terms of maybe an ethnic minority or what have you, to be in a meeting and ask questions. Don't feel intimidated or discouraged if you don't receive an immediate reply in terms of an email or a return phone call. And those are some of the challenges that I've heard over the years, and I'm still learning. That a lot of businesses come to me and say, Jerome, it's good that you're answering the phone. And they really appreciate it. They're very sincere. So we take, as an office, we take it very seriously that there are many businesses here in Frederick County and other locations that are very interested in competing for those requirements and contributing as far as to the overall mission objectives within the United States Army and the Medical Research and Material Command.
Do you have anything else? Do you have anything else before we move on?
No, I guess I'll let everybody else, and then we have a final
Sure.
session, right?
Okay. All right.
Well, if you want me to, I certainly can.
I know. I do.
While we have you,
Yes.
what about the compliance aspect of it? We heard some discussion early on about compliance. What about compliance? Either one can field that question.
Sure. So I can tell you from the Army and Department of Defense standpoint. So we have goals. We talked about goals,
Sure.
SARS targets. So as an example, say if there's XYZ organization, they have a 30% goal or target. And that's above and beyond as far as the federal. And for some reason or another, we fall short of that, of achieving that particular goal. Say the goal was 30% in end of September, end of the fiscal year. Say, well, you guys only achieved not 30, you got like 25. Why? So we have a responsibility to explain in explicit rationale the reasons why, and nothing to kind of sugarcoat anything. To say it might have been a large contract that was awarded based upon as far as requirements, and there were no small businesses that competed or responded to the RFI. I know I keep on pounding on that, but I know that some instances that some small businesses say, Jerome, I saw the RFI posted, but rumor indicated that it was already wired for a large firm. And when I hear that, that's a red flag for me, and I listen attentively, and I respect that, but oftentimes it's just a rumor. And what I ask the small businesses to do, if you want to hear, a good response, email the contracting officer, email or call or visit with the small business professional, and get it directly from them. When you hear those rumors, I can see how that can really, alter as far as your initial course in terms of pursuing a particular contract. And when it comes down to say, well, you didn't meet a particular goal, and they go back and look at their market research, they say, well, we had it out, posted for, we'll say Fed Biz Ops for 30 days, and we had 30 companies that responded to that RFI, request for information. And out of the 30, there was only one small business. And that one small business, they eventually found out that they were not, that was not their particular core capability. And then I can go back and say, well, put it out there for extra 15 days. And they put it out for extra 15 days. And they have all that documentation to basically support and to substantiate that an effort was made to reach out to attract the small businesses for that particular requirement. And again, I say that because it's important, and that information can go up for higher headquarters for somebody to say, well, we have a multi-million-dollar contract. Why didn't we have any small businesses? Or small businesses say, you know what, we never had an opportunity. And we go back and say, did you respond to the RFI? Well, I didn't see it. Well, nobody told me. So those are the type of things we try to work with the individuals ahead of time, and this is the reason why we come to these type of outreach functions and other functions and events to help share good information that can give you some incentive to pursue those particular contracts.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
My office primary role when it comes to compliance, we have a couple places where our office is critical in the process of the city and prime contractors being compliant. When bids come in, if goals are set on a particular contract, along with those bids, those prime contractors must submit statement of intent forms of the subcontractors that they intend to use on the project. Description of services, dollar amount, if it's a requirements contract, the percentage amount, and those statement of intent forms not only have to be filled out correctly, I mean, you don't dot an I, you don't dot a T, you're gonna be found non-compliant. Those statement of intent forms have to add up to the goals that are with that contract. If they're not, you're deemed non-compliant, and we'll go to the second lowest bidder. If the second lowest bidder is non-compliant, we'll go to the third lowest bidder. It is not uncommon for the city of Baltimore to unfortunately have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, in aggregate millions of dollars, making sure that this program is sound, that the folks comply. They have gone to the second and third lowest bidder, even though it may have been a few $100,000 more, to make sure that our stakeholders, MBEs, WBEs, and most importantly, our prime contractors understand the city is very serious about meeting these goals. And if I've determined that there should be a goal in the contract, I've already done the analysis to know that there's the opportunity and there's the availability. So it is rare that we get waiver requests from prime contractors at the time of bid. I can't recall, let me say this, I'm sure a few have submitted waiver requests. I don't recall granting any of them at the time of bid. If they didn't come in with a requisite participation and submit a waiver request, it's unlikely it would have been granted because we've already made the determination that that's the appropriate goal and there's availability out there. Now, that does not mean if during the term of that contract, the scope of work changes, the marketplace changes, if for some reason they're unable to meet those goals, we will certainly consider a waiver request at that time. But at the time of bid, it's unlikely that my office would grant a waiver request. So in terms of compliance, at the time of bid, we make sure whoever the recommended awardee is compliant and has met the goals that were set on that contract. And those statement of intent forms that they've signed have to be executed by them and the subcontractor. And the only way they can that they can replace or substitute or remove one of those subcontractors is with my office's permission. And that would typically only be granted if the subcontractor agreed to it. If the subcontractor is ready, willing, and able to perform, as I say all the time, whether it's MBE or the prime, you guys are at arm's length business people. Just because you're an MBE doesn't mean you get some pass. And just because you're a prime contractor, you don't think you can just push them or your client, i.e. the city, around. You guys go in the back room, you guys go to a bar. I've told folks go walk around the park and talk about how you first got into business, talk about your families. But in the private sector, you wouldn't visit this dispute on your client. So in the public sector, don't come and say, look, I can't work with my prime, or we didn't come to terms. Well, you should have come to terms before you bid. Okay, so once that bid is submitted, we expect not just the primes, but the subs as well to both fulfill their obligations. And unless there, again, is a change in the scope of work, change in the availability, the subcontractor doesn't want to perform, we hold those primes accountable to the end of that contract to fill what they agreed to. And those statement of intent forms and that affidavit of participation become a material part of that contract. Same thing with private development. If you get a tax incremental financing, a TIF, for infrastructure, if you get a pilot payment in lieu of taxes, if you get some fiscal benefit from the city, we expect those private developers to meet that 27-10% goal in the discretionary portion of the budget. And if they don't, next time you want a TIF or a pilot from the city of Baltimore, I'll see at the hearing. And the city council can make whatever determination they want, but I certainly will be there to testify about the facts as how you committed to X, and you got the city taxpayer money, and you walked away leaving millions of dollars in minority business participation and W participation on the table. I take that very serious as well. So in terms of compliance, those are my primary functions when it comes to our program.
We're very excited to have you in the city of Frederick today. Jason?
So as we go into question number 3, as we examine our procurement infrastructure, we notice that there to be a common denominator in every jurisdiction that has a program which encourages MBE DBE participation. We have seen that there's an investment made from the municipality or state government entity to provide for the appropriate staffing and other resources needed to execute their program successfully. Can you all both comment on, from Baltimore, the Army Contracting Command, that if you've made or improved your shop, whether internally or externally? And we'll start with you, Mr. Maultsby.
Okay, thanks. And if I can have the next chart, please. Okay. That's a very good question, and as I was preparing the responses, one of the things that came out initially was how can we, in terms of the Department of Army, do a better job of being clear, open, transparent in our communicating the requirement. So again, we talked about the forecast. When individuals stop by, we'll say the small business office, sometimes it's scheduled, sometimes it's unscheduled. And we want to make sure that we don't take it for granted that the individuals stopping by don't have a genuine interest in fulfilling a particular requirement. So when we look at that, we want to make sure it's okay, do you clearly understand the process? And understand the process sometimes is kind of convoluted, and the Army in particular, they're doing a better job of trying to provide better streamlined instructions in real time and also electronically. And one of the other bullets I have down here, there's many agencies, I'll say Small Business Administration as an example. So you have a Small Business Administration, Baltimore District, you have outreach from that they participate in here in Frederick, Maryland. And I know that they also have the Small Business Development Center, SBDC. You have I'm talking about for Frederick, the local Frederick Service Corps Retired Executive Score. We have the State of Maryland PTAC in terms of Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And we have other agencies that are here within, I'll say, in Frederick County and maybe even the neighboring counties that can provide assistance to small businesses. Some of that assistance is no charge. Again, they can help walk you through the process. They can help you, look at as far as what you may think is an appropriate, requirement that's worthy of competing for. But they also will help you say, you know what, that's not in your particular core capabilities, and maybe you should look at either something else or. What we're finding more over the past couple of years is that a lot of large companies, a lot of primes, we'll say a lot of defense contractors, they're looking for small businesses to partner with. A long time ago, it used to be the opposite. Small businesses, they're knocking on the door for prime, say we're looking to partner. Now we're seeing a little shift in terms of large firms that say we want to partner with a small firm. And by the way, the small firm, you can be the prime and we'll be the sub. And again, we're looking at making sure that there's no pass-through, and that if that's what they agree upon, that it's formalized, and that gives the small businesses even more of an opportunity to roll up the sleeves, dive in, and be an active participant in competing for those federal procurement dollars, especially with the Department of Army. I have here about the capability statements. So one of the things I look at, especially now with the technology, there should be a easy way for small businesses to develop a 1 or 2 page capability statement. And for those that are not familiar with a capability statement, it basically identifies what your core capabilities are within a particular, we'll say, information technology, information management, or if you're a construction firm, do you have the bonding? It's just a 1 sheet or 1 or 2 pager that will kind of give a quick snapshot to a government procurement official, we'll say in the Department of Army, and they can look at that and say, yes, you can't meet with me in person today. However, I can review the capability statement, and I can say, yes, this is good, and then it can give you some additional information on how to respond or when you can expect to respond as far as to the request for information or the RFP. And I know some companies will say, do I have anything that's glossy print? You know, a lot of, I call it window dressing, and I basically ask them kindly, just focus on the basics. Don't worry about, you know, the glitter and the fancy stuff. Just stick to the basic and be able to kind of have that capability statement describe or tell your story in terms of who you are. So if there's a contracting officer reviewing that, he or she can actually very quickly determine, yes, this is something we're going to focus in on, or no, maybe you should look at another opportunity down the road. So those are the type of things that I think are worthy investments, because time is money, and sometimes if you don't have as far as the resources readily available, the agencies I mentioned earlier, they're out there. I talk with many of them. They're looking for, you know, an opportunity to help. Again, there's no guarantee, so that should be, you know, clearly understood. When you hire someone we'll say as a consultant, as an example, there are many here in Maryland and other places, and they say, well, if I'm actually hiring someone as a consultant, is there a guarantee that they work with me for 2 or 3 months? Will the end result translate into a contract award? And some of the consultants that I know, that I speak with, they say they have that as a disclaimer, because there's a lot of moving parts, but they will commit to providing, you know, top-notch service and advice. And I think that's probably an area that small businesses should consider, especially if they don't have a lot of information readily available to them.
Thank you, Mr. Maultsby. Mr. Billups? Let me
I-
ask that question again.
Sure.
Perfect. I'll go back to it. So again, as we examine our procurement infrastructure, we notice there seems to be a commitment or common denominator in every jurisdiction that encourages the participation. What we're asking is, what kind of investments were being made, maybe within your office or that the city made, to make sure that this ran successfully? That could have been from dollars, staff. I see that look on your face.
Well, I didn't realize we were going to be filmed tonight, so no, I'm going to be very frank with it, because I'm very frank in Baltimore City, particularly in a jurisdiction like Baltimore City, the birthplace of Perrin Mitchell, Thurgood Marshall, really the epicenter of the state and local minority business program. I've never met an elected official in a major jurisdiction that had a large minority population that didn't champion minority business utilization. Mm-hmm. I've never heard anyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, from Martin O'Malley to our current mayor, Catherine Pugh, everybody loves minority businesses. Mm-hmm. But I will say this, as you said, you look across the country, 25 years ago when I started dealing with state and local business programs, that was the number one issue. We don't have the resources. We don't have the personnel. We don't have the technology. We don't have the commitment. Yet, once again, politically, we're on the front lines in terms of being the political football. It's certainly, everybody recognizes having a robust vendor contractor base, regardless of what color they are, is important. Mm-hmm. But I will say this, I'm the kind of individual, I'm going to get it done regardless. And I think that on a certain level has worked against me when it comes to getting resources. Because Courtney, if you can do it like this, like that, wow, we could probably, so long story short, I've lost 2 positions in my office. And it has not impacted the quality of our work or the efficiency. It just means I had to work harder. So when it comes to resources, I would say whatever the program is, whether it's minority business, whether it's agriculture, social services, you know, you have to make the appropriate investment for the result that you want. And my experience has been across this country, I've worked on disparity studies in 40 plus jurisdictions, that most of those programs, most, not all, some do a much better job. Atlanta's a great example. San Antonio is doing a phenomenal job these days. Los Angeles, New York have always done well. Minneapolis has done well. But obviously in a lot of large jurisdictions, really urban jurisdictions, between the school system, between policing, between social services, you're talking about tight budgets. And unfortunately, everybody could probably use more positions. But I will say this, so if you're going to look at having an effective program, not just a program, an effective program, you've got to invest in the people, you've got to invest in the technology, and you've got to invest in resources. So for instance, in my office, I had a staff of 7. I've lost an investigator, and I've lost the assistant chief position. Well, it didn't hurt us. But my thought was I could get some folks that would help us, and that didn't happen. But that being said, so the result of that dynamic is when I got there, so typically they say the Maryland Department of Transportation takes about 90 days to get your application processed. That's best case scenario. It's 90 days to 6 months. When I got there, we had a 75 application backlog. Now, I think Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority hired me about, been 15, 20 years ago to clear up their backlog of renewals. They had hundreds of renewal applications that hadn't been processed for years, and they would just continue to recertify folks. The problem is once you get a backlog, it's hard to get back in front of it. So we notoriously, like the Maryland State Department of Transportation, notoriously has hundreds of certification applications, the backlog. When I got to the city, we had a backlog of about 75 applications. What that meant was when somebody who submits an application in about 30, 45 days says, hey, what's the status of my application? When I got there, I could say, well, we haven't even looked at it, and there's 15 to 20 applications in front of you. I said, that's unacceptable. But with the backlog, you do 3, 2 come in. You do 4, 6 come in. Once you create that backlog, you can almost never get in front of it. So I think I spent 3 weeks diligently focusing on processing that backlog of applications, as well as doing my other roles and responsibilities. And I'm a tough guy. I'm as tough as it comes. And let me tell you something. I remember that Monday after that 3-week period, not knowing if I could go in. And I dragged myself in there, and my secretary, Shirley, was not there. And her name is Shirley. She didn't show up. And I know if I felt that way, I know what that put her through, but we eliminated that backlog. So applications would take anywhere from 90 days to 6 months. If you submit a complete application with the city of Baltimore, you will be approved in less than 10 days. And I can personally guarantee that because I do the applications. We don't have a backlog. When they come in, we process them. If it's complete, you can get certified 3 days, 4 days. And that's only because it took Shirley a day or 2 to get the file folder in my file cabinet. So that being said, resources are always going to be limited in government, and particularly for programs that are not deemed essential or not mandated. And so that being said, I think you've got to get good people that are dedicated to what this work is. I mean, I don't do this work for the money. I do this work because I've always had a passion of watching small business owners do well, particularly the ones that start small and become these. That's the joy of my life. I can remember some of my clients and some of these firms, some of the folks got certified at Baltimore City, some of these folks that were at their wits' end, their mortgages, their family, got to take the kids out of private school, all these things. And somehow they become successful, and they've employed people. They've created opportunities for other folks. They have spurned entrepreneurial spirit in other individuals. It's a real phenomenal thing. So essentially, the resources are always going to be relatively limited, but I think if you get the right people, and again, technology is critical. Everything in my office was paper. Everything in my office was paper. And sometimes it was paper to fill in another piece of paper, to fill in another piece of paper, to put in a file. So I still don't have my compliance software. It's coming. I still don't have my online certification module for that with that commodity. It's coming. But what we have done, it's not the latest and greatest technology, but I introduced my staff to the Excel spreadsheet. Okay? Now, if it was 20 years ago, I'd be a genius. Today, it's a little sad, but you know what? It works. And if you do your job and you put in your time, it works, and it's as efficient as you can get with an archaic process. So I'll shut up on this. One of the biggest issues I had was my secretary and some of our staff would spend half the day running around looking for the file. Where's the file? When did you have the file? Bob, you have the file. Courtney, you have the file. My office is very organized. It's not here. If it's here, I'd know about it. Why isn't it in the file cabinet? Well, who has the file? Who's that? So it's where's the file? Who spent all this time looking for the file? And I said, wait a minute. We've got a routing slip. That routing slip has the date that file the application came in, has the name of the firm, it has where it went to. Where's the routing slip? Stapled to the front of the file. So, I didn't think, did anybody think maybe just take the routing slip and put them all in one file? That way you can look at. So, I mean, I remember somebody told me years ago, I've spent my entire career waiting for the cavalry. Maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. But one of my dear friends told me about 10 or 15 years ago, said, Courtney, you are the cavalry. So I'm under no illusions that I'm not going to get any additional staff. My software has been coming since I've been 3.5 years that I've been there. It's been coming. And it was coming 7 years before I got there. But that being said, it's the same. So that being said, if you are going to endeavor on a effective program, you've got to really be thoughtful and say, what is it going to take? When you look at what can be derived from that, an increased vendor contract base, which is going to mean lower prices, which is going to mean innovation, which is going to be more employment, a larger tax base. When you start talking about the investment of another couple $100,000, that's nothing in the big scheme of things. When you look at our private development projects, even folks talk about the cost of a disparity study. When I was doing it was about $300,000. Now they're anywhere from, I think Baltimore in 2014 paid $780,000. Now we had Dr. John Wainwright from there, who's the best in the business, but they're anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000. And I was speaking in Delaware about 2 years ago when they were talking about the cost of a study. And I said, I remember I was a former Queen Anne's County Commissioner, and there was a study done on the Delmarva fox squirrel. There was also a study done for the dwarf wedge mussel. I understand in Louisiana, it's the musky frog debate or something. So to suggest that you can't find the resources to develop small businesses in your jurisdiction that is going to in turn be an economic driver, it's not only wrong, it's disingenuous. It's the investment, you don't want to put the investment there. For whatever reason, you don't want to put the investment there. Politically, the optics may look better somewhere else. A playground looks better. But at the end of the day, economic development is really what's going to drive any jurisdiction in terms of addressing its maladies and also growing for its future. So again, economic development being the driver, small business, that's always been the key, not just in Frederick and not just in the state of Maryland, but across this country, and it always has been.
Thank you.
And just a quick note for the folks in the audience and those who are watching, the City of Frederick currently does not have any dedicated staff or program dollars for this program, so hence the reason we asked the question.
Yes.
Can I ask a question in response to that? Are there any future plans to obtain resources to support that?
So, go ahead,
Short
please,
answer would be
Alderman.
yes.
Alderman, speak up.
I wonder. Well, I wanted to ask a follow-up question to that. Yes. Also, and I don't know, Mr. Maultsby, you may be able to answer this question, but I want to direct this question to you as a elected official. How important has your county council or your city council been in regards to this, in providing? You mentioned in regards to taking positions, but also in terms of support, community support, internal support, political support. I know there's a lot of things wrapped into one, but how important have they been? Because you mentioned about your city. I know some of your legislators as well, and how they have been proponents publicly of saying that, because no one wants to go against this publicly, but privately we know differently, or we may know differently. So can you talk about how that has been in terms of private support in terms of internal structuring, also in terms of support, also in terms of resources. Can you talk a little bit, and maybe you can also add as well?
Sure. I mean, short of the resources issue, I mean, that's just a
Yeah.
budgetary constraint that the city has. But I certainly can say this. Our city solicitor, Judge Andre Davis, former Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, our current mayor, Catherine Pugh, Council President Young, and all the council members, as well as the comptroller, have been nothing but supportive of me and my office.
Good.
I couldn't ask for more support from any of them. They've been advocates, they've been supporters, they've appreciated what I've done. Again, it's just, dealing with the issue of limited resources in a city that has a lot of commitments to a lot of different things.
And can you talk about, not the limited resources part, but can you talk about how important that's been for your office, their support? How important that's been for your office in terms of doing what you need to do?
Well, I've been, as I said, about 40 jurisdictions across the country looking at various programs, and they're not all the same.
Yes.
I did a study in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's Jackson, Mississippi. That's very different from Atlanta. So that being said, there are jurisdictions where in a certain level, I'm not referencing any specific jurisdiction, where the political structure is on a certain level fundamentally opposed to the programs. And not just a lack of support, but fundamentally opposed to these types of programs. So to be in a jurisdiction where you have full support, for me, is amazing. I mean, but there are only a handful of jurisdictions you can really talk about like that. Atlanta, New York, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., L.A., San Antonio now, Minneapolis. Your large jurisdictions where you have not just a large minority population, large female population, but a well-educated population and a population that understands that diversity is a benefit, not a problem. It's an actual benefit. And so in those jurisdictions, and also that changes the political dynamics. Obviously, that changes the political dynamics as opposed to smaller, more rural jurisdictions. So it would make sense that you would have more support. So, in fact, that's the one thing I must say I've enjoyed nothing but support, not just from our elected leadership, but also the MBNW community. Baltimore's got a historic minority business community, and they have been fully supportive of me and my program. And let me tell you something, the prime contractors as well, Whiting Turner.
Yeah.
You've got some my program would not be successful, but not for prime contractors participating in a meaningful and sincere way. And they have. So I will say this, I've got all the support I need except financial and except technological. But other than that, as far as the community, as far as our elected official, it's been full support from day one.
Mr. Moss.
I can say that since being appointed to position in 2002, not to date myself, that the Army's leadership and the current Army leadership have been very supportive of small business. Again, those particular metrics I showed earlier is a reflection of that. But over the years, and many of the individuals that are here in Frederick County that have been to local and regional events, we provide that information in terms of our achievements. And just thinking back from 2002, the various commanding generals, the various garrison commanders, and I can focus it on Colonel Scott Halter, as well as Major General Barbara Holcomb, and the Army Medcom Commanding General, Lieutenant General Naja West. From top down, they've been very supportive. They understand, and when they have questions, our office will stand up and answer those questions. And if we don't have the answers, we'll go back and research it. And I think that's part of the reason why the Army, in particular, out of the other services, everybody is unique in terms of Air Force, Navy. But for the Army, we've been very successful. The metrics support that and substantiate as far as, how well we've done. But again, we don't rest on our laurels because, again, one fiscal year, the numbers will fluctuate. And I think that's business 101. And oftentimes we have individuals say, well, why aren't you doing a better job, we'll say, in the historically underutilized business zone area? And what are the challenges? So when I go to the regional conference, as far as the HubZone regional conference, I hear from other agencies, they talk about some of the challenges. So to answer your question, we have consistently received strong support as far as for our program. We have resources, and if the resources are spread thin, we can go back and ask others to assist us.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why I feel strongly about the support that we receive, because it's not just a one individual program. It's not a one person program. It's a collective program. And there's some synergy that's involved in terms of command and generals, program directors, researchers. From the garrison standpoint, we have individuals that are working with, the garrison support staff, other contracting activities. Some people may not know that there's more than just one or two procurement activities on Fort Detrick. A lot of people say, hey, we go to you, Jerome. But I said, there's other individuals out there. They say, well, who? I said, well, it's USDA. There's, the NBAC Center. There's NIH. And that's, well, and a lot of information is readily available as far as on the Detrick, the Garrison homepage, as well as the MRMC homepage. And we're doing more research on how we can enhance the webpage. So it's not a COP website, it's an active website. We make changes throughout the year to ensure that information is clear and the strategic communications is what it should be for not only internal, but more importantly, external agencies and also stakeholders.
Thank you.
Would you mind taking the next question?
Yes, unless you want to take the next question.
Just a quick note that we do have our co-chair, Will, had a family event that he had to prioritize. It was unexpected, so that's why we're sort of softballing it here a little bit.
All right. So next question. As part of our review, we are also attempting to identify barriers to participation and how best to address existing structural or perceived barriers for the city's future business partners. Can you both share your thoughts on ways your organization has helped to learn and or remove barriers from business participation? And I guess we'll start with Mr. Maultsby, if that's fine.
If I can have the next chart, please. Okay. So I'll refer to the first bullet. So I'll talk about strategic communications before, and people say, what is a StratCom or strategic communications? And that's, I guess, in today's highly technical and very fast-paced environment from a business standpoint, is very important that that we as the Army, that we develop a strategic communication plan so that information that is transmitted is easily understood. We allow for questions, and we're also receptive to feedback. So we don't have all the answers, and we don't shy away if we don't have the answer. I'll make a note even this evening. I'll make a note and get back with you. But from the business standpoint, it's really important that they understand that when it comes down to awards to small businesses as a prime or as a subcontractor, there's some requirements. And again, we talked about that earlier about subcontracting plans. We have the subcontracting reports, and there's the compliance with that is a small business coordination records that's completed well in advance, that involves as far as the small business administration, the procurement center representative, the contracting officer, the small business professional. So all that is part of the communication in the early stages of the advanced acquisition planning prior to the RFP being posted, so to make sure that we say, okay, are we certain that the market research states that there are many small businesses? Are there no small businesses that are capable for competing for this particular requirement? But with that being said, we definitely need to have more emphasis on ensuring that we open the lines of communication, whether it's online, in person, face-to-face meetings. Some individuals say, Jerome, my boss doesn't want to have a conference call, or they don't want to. They want to see you in person. And I said, well, where are you located? And it could be in Montgomery County. It could be in D.C. And heaven forbid if it's during the wintertime, during inclement weather. So what I try to focus in on, how can I get that information? How can our office get the information to them instantaneously? And again, if somebody has to drive up 270. That's understandable, but I try to focus in on getting that information to them when they need it. If it's available currently on the website, And if they still want to come up, I'm always open. I have a lot of individuals that come to me and say, hey, Jerome, I didn't have a scheduled meeting, but I just happened to be in the area. And I give them the same red carpet treatment if they had as far as a scheduled meeting. But I do caveat that by saying, well, since you didn't have a scheduled meeting with me, my time may be a little limited, and we can follow up with another meeting. And I think that's what people are looking for, especially small businesses. They don't want to feel like there's a perceived barrier or actual barrier in terms of say, well, what's going on? And if I can't see Jerome in person or someone, a contracting officer, they feel like they're not given an open opportunity. One of the other things we want to do is in our communication is really focus in on embracing small businesses. Again, we have metrics out there, but sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And your actions speak louder than your words. And in terms of actions, they want to say, show us where. And again, I hate to go back to the metrics, but that's one of the reasons why we post that information, to be open and let folks know this is where we are, good or bad or indifferent. And hopefully that information, once it's publicized, it will give you an opportunity like everyone else to participate and compete for those requirements. One of the other things I'd like to also mention is that when we talk about the competition, and a lot of people kind of shy away from that, say, well, can I be guaranteed like a sole source contract? Well, there are opportunities, but I want to make sure people understand that there's the rule of if you're able to, fine, but can you, after contract award, fulfill the terms and conditions of that contract? And a lot of people say, well, I got the contract, that's the easy part. And I say, yeah, you're kind of right. But the challenge is if there's a Jerome and Jerome LLC and they fall short coming out the blocks, if the contract start date at the 8th of November, they say, where's Jerome? Well, Jerome had a tummy ache. And I understand that, there's some, but somewhere along the line, I have a responsibility as a small business person to call ahead of time or let someone know and let the contracting officer or the contracting officer representatives know, say, we have a problem here. We're going to take care of this, and to reassure them and just, again, follow up in your actions, not just your words. And I know a lot more individuals that embrace the small businesses that are able to do that and not give them the impression that say, well, I got the award, that's the easy part. And Jerome, you're pushing to meet and exceed the metrics, but the actual deliverables were kind of lackluster, and we don't want that. We want to make sure, again, especially we have a very important mission of supporting soldiers, their family members, and we want to make sure that there's no compromise as far as the quality, as far as of those services and business solutions being rendered. And the last point I'd like to make is in terms of about the strategic communications is, pardon me, we have small businesses and we have large businesses. And large businesses oftentimes, because of the resources, they have more opportunity to reach out and communicate their requirements and talk with contracting officers. One of the things I've shared with others in small businesses to encourage them is that go to these outreach events. And I'm just going to use one as an example, if I may. So I think it was either last week or the week before, there was an event here in Frederick at the Frederick Innovative Technology Center, FITCI. Major General Holcomb was the keynote speaker. I was there in the background supporting her. And I know many of the individuals that were in attendance. And when I look around, and I've been to many of those, and I know that was the 10th annual, and I look around, I scan the audience, and I look, because I like to observe from a qualitative research standpoint. And when I don't see a lot of quote unquote small businesses there, I start to kind of wonder. And I go back sometimes and I ask, I say, hey, I didn't see you. The next day I say, I didn't see you at the event. What happened? And they say, well, I didn't think it was for me. And a lot of it is just speculation. They don't really understand. And what we try to do is try to kind of make sure that there's some, again, clear lines of communication. And although we may not be sponsoring that event, if I'm there and the general is there, we're looking for large and small, and I want to ensure that the small businesses here in Frederick City, Frederick County, that they consider participating in those events. Even though you may be one of the few, attend those events, learn, ask questions, there might be a little ice breaking because you might be a little nervous, and I found that to be very helpful. We have an upcoming event on the 29th to the 30th of November, the Smart Procurement Conference. The Medical Research Material Command have been, actively involved in that for 16 consecutive years. And I can say that I've seen over the years, the past 16 years, an increased involvement and participation because that particular event is focused primarily on small businesses. So over the years, in my observation and my unofficial research, I've seen a great deal more of individual small businesses registering for that event, participating, taking away some lessons learned, and I trust that will be the future event will also attract more small businesses to, listen, learn. There are no contracts awarded at that event, but it does give you an opportunity to listen to other individuals, contracting officers, program managers, so you can listen and hear, and also see individuals that may, resemble you or may not resemble you. And then you listening and talking with them and find out there might be an opportunity for future partnerships and teaming arrangements. And I think that's the beauty of those type of outreach events, and in terms of trying to help remove those barriers, because some of the barriers are perceived. And when I talk with individuals and I hear that, I respond diplomatically and ask them, please attend. If there's a cost associated with registration, I look at it as an investment of their time and as a business person.
Very good. Mr. Billups?
The biggest barrier in the marketplace, it's been made very clear to me over the last 25 years that the biggest barrier in the marketplace is not race, it's not racism, it's not sexism, it's the marketplace. Business is tough. Small business is even tougher. If it was just hard work and talent, there'd be a lot more successful businesses out there. It takes a little bit of luck. It takes a little bit of the right place at the right time. It takes perseverance beyond what most people would be willing to do. I taught the last class at the SBA Emerging Leaders program about 2 weeks ago, and I can't, there was a gentleman from the SBA on the panel with me, and he was talking about how you guys are crazy. He'd been a long-time government employee, 30 years at the SBA. You guys are crazy. And the fact of the matter is, it takes some real courage, some real guts to put your financial well-being on the line, particularly if you have a family, particularly if you have a mortgage, to take that risk. And I've always admired folks who are willing to do that. Someone reminded me that my closet in my room growing up had La Office on the door. And in there I had a little desk, and that was Le Office. That's French, by the way, Le Office. So I probably have always had an entrepreneurial spirit. But, my late father, Colonel Billups, was a big proponent of tough love. And the fact of the matter is, none of what I've done in my career has been to lower the bar for small businesses, minority business, women-owned businesses. If anything, it's to raise the bar. You have to work harder. You have to do better. You don't have the resources to mess up. You don't have the resources to blow one contract, because you blow one contract. Look, I can't tell you how many your big defense contractors have screwed up contracts.
Tell me about it.
And they're still around. And they're going to be around because they're going to be around. But when you're small, and unfortunately sometimes when you're a minority or female and you mess up one time, that's it. Not only is that it for you, that may be it for every single other minority contractor or women-owned contractor that Prime deals with because of you and your performance. So I think, certainly governmental entities have a role and certainly have an obligation to redress discrimination of public contracting in their past. But ultimately, it's to give you an equal opportunity to those bidding opportunities. I mean, that's all you're entitled to. As the gentleman said, there's no guarantee. What we're guaranteeing you is the same opportunity to those contracts that everyone has. But at the end of the day, it's arm's length business, and you have to deal as a business person, and that's tough. It doesn't matter what color you are, what size your business are. If you don't think Fortune 500 companies don't worry every day about their bottom line, that they don't fire people every day for losing a contract or not winning an award that they thought they were supposed to win, that happens there too. So again, I think there's a sense that somehow government or government contracting program can remedy the maladies in the marketplace. No, it can give you opportunities. At the end of the day, you've got to deal in the marketplace like any other business owner. I learned my third year in business, the same things you can't afford to have are the same things you can't afford not to have.
Yep.
And so I get applications all the time to say, hey, where's a copy? I need a copy of your bylaws. I need a copy of your operating agreement. What are those? I don't have those. And I said, well, do you have an attorney? No, I can't afford an attorney. Okay. Need a financial statement. What's that? Well, let your CPA prepare a financial statement for you. I can't afford a CPA. And unfortunately, I don't care how talented you are, how great your ideas are, how hard you want to work, undercapitalization is probably the biggest problem in business. And it's the number one reason why business fails. They're undercapitalized. If you can't finance for 90 days, you're going to have a tough go of it. Now, they were supposed to pay me in 30 days. The government entity was supposed to pay them in 15 days. You very well may be right. But, again, it hasn't gotten to your bank account yet, and you've got obligations because your suppliers are not floating you like they're floating the big guys.
There you go.
Okay? So, I'm very frank about this. You really have to focus on business. And nowadays, there's really no excuse for it. As was stated earlier, there's so many resources out there available. There are so many resources ready available that are free. And then I tell folks, you can go to a legal clinic at a law school. I tell folks all the time, you can go on the internet, okay? You don't want to pay for a lawyer? Guess who gets to find out what an operating agreement is? Guess who gets to find one on the internet, download it, tailor it to them, learn what it is, do it. You don't want to pay for a CPA? Guess who has to learn how to do financial statements? Okay? You can't do neither. You can't do neither. If you don't want to pay for the stuff you need, you got to do it yourself. And that's the number one issue for small business owners. I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to do that. Well, you can't afford to be in business either. And that's not something the city of Frederick or any other state and local jurisdiction is going to remedy. You've got to put yourself in a position where you can be a successful business owner by doing the same fundamentals that any successful business does. That's your best chance of success. And if you don't want to follow the basic fundamentals, you're not going to make it. You will not make it. It's only a matter of time. So for anybody going into business, don't think getting a contracting opportunity or even having access to contract opportunities is going to make you a successful business owner. The only thing that's going to make you a successful business owner is you and luck.
And if I can add,
He said.
if I can add that we talked about available resources. I'm still learning, so we're here in Frederick, Maryland. Several years ago, people used to consider Frederick, Maryland outside the national capital region. Kind of still, sort of, but there's so many resources available here and around. I consider Frederick part of the national capital region. So if you go down a little further down the road on 270 in Montgomery County, go down towards, Howard County, wherever like that, there are resources. And I don't look at it as a cost. I look at it as an investment. So if you're a business owner, a micro entrepreneur, a 1 or 2 person shop, I have on one of the slides to consider not only teaming arrangements and synergy with other companies, large or small. Look at informal mentor-protege program. Align yourself with a large firm and say, this is what we're trying to do. Are you able to kind of mentor me? As a small business, you'd be surprised. And I just want to kind of underscore that, because a lot of people say, well, I don't have time, or I don't have the resources, I don't have the additional cash flow, or I don't have the arrangements with multiple financial institutions for extra capital. And I'm sensitive to that. So I say, well, you know what, there may be, talked about, there may be a nearby university that can assist. From a community college, 4-year school. I have one of my briefing charts to talk about one of the other things we work on in terms of offices, coordinating very closely with historically black colleges and universities. Here in the state of Maryland, we have 4. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, I understand that, but I'm not part of the academia. They may have some opportunities. They may have some free classes. They may have some seminars. They may have some students, some undergraduates and graduate students that are willing to work with you. So I would just ask and encourage, from a small business standpoint, that if you're having some difficulty, don't look at it as a cost. Look at it as an investment. It's going to invest some your time. You have to roll up your sleeves. But there's a lot of smart people and a lot of other small businesses and large businesses that are willing to work with you to help you accomplish your goal and fulfill the mission.
question over.
Thank you. One of our outreach strategies is to talk to experts and folks who've been in the field and done great work, such as yourself, and learn ways to improve and how we can communicate our procurement strategies better, particularly between the city and existing businesses and partners. And also, how do we, as well as foster new DBE, MBE opportunities? What tips might you have in terms of effective methods to identify businesses which are eligible to join our MBE, DBE programs, including those who have not yet certified themselves? And you mentioned that. What tips can you give us or extend to us in what you've learned during your processes or your time in the field?
Sure, and if I could ask you to go to the next chart, please. So I talked about this a little earlier, a few minutes ago, matter of fact. So again, try not to work by yourself. The old adage is there's strength in numbers. If you're looking at a requirement, even if you think you know, ask questions, be inquisitive, do a lot of the work at the advanced stages, call the small business professionals, call the contracting officers. One of my former mentors who unfortunately passed away several years ago, Ms. Tracy Penson, she was the director of Army Small Business. She had a term called being persistent. And that term should be near and dear to all businesses, in particular small businesses. You have to be persistent. You have to pound the pavement. You have to be a professional. Everybody's passionate. I was talking earlier to one of the attendees. They said there's a big thing about now. I said, well, I'm passionate about what I do. So are you passionate, or are you excited, or are you emotional? So what does that mean? I said, well, when things go awry, how do you respond to that? Especially if you're a business person. So again, it sounds kind of quirky and it sounds kind of corny, but when you're in a hot seat as a business person, you have a responsibility. What are your work ethics? Are you willing to go above and beyond, what the expectations are? That's what we're looking at the Army. We want to focus in on businesses meeting and exceeding the expectations of the government and the taxpayer. And we talked about that earlier. The days of saying, well, let's go ahead and get it. I got the contract, and I'm gonna just do the bare minimum. Okay, fine. And you might say, well, some of the large businesses, they do that all the time. And it's like, well, you're a small business. People are looking at you, and you have the resources available if you're willing to, ask questions. Even if if it's not free, you might have to invest a little bit of your time and resources to obtain that information. So one of the things I did in preparation, because I want to make sure that I was prepared for the meeting, around an hour before I came here, I was there on my computer at work, and I was kind of saying, well, I want to make sure, I say the right thing. And then I went online because one of the questions, this last question here, I said, you know what, let me go in, because I like to do research, and I like to kind of benchmark best practices. So there I was on my computer, and I have a copy of it here, not for everyone, but and you can make copies of this. Because I talk about, I said, well, what, work towards enhancing, consider benchmarking best practices. So I typed in, this is Frederick County. I typed in, I said, well, Montgomery County. And I typed in Montgomery County, Minority Business Enterprise. And I have here in front of me, I don't know what date it is. It's a 2-pager, and it's a brochure. Montgomery County Minority Business Program. And I don't know, because I was looking into the Frederick, because I don't know what Frederick is doing, and I know they're doing better every year, and this is one of the reasons why we're having this particular panel. But I wanted to share this with you because I see here that they have the county executive, they have a statement, just like an Army. The General Holcombs, Colonel Halter, and others, they're the leaders, and they're responsible for a lot of things, but we need their backing, and we need, as far as their support, and we've always received the support, not only at the command level, but also the headquarters level, Department of Defense, Department of Army. And I saw this, and I said, oh, this is pretty good, man. I was impressed, because not only are the words intact, but also I'm kind of like a visual person. So when I see a brochure and it has a good cross section of ethnic and racial diversity, that helps the small businesses feel more empowered. Say, wow, that person looks like me, or I'm a veteran. So I'll share this with you because this right here says, and I'll read it. It says, connecting minority, female, and disabled-owned businesses with government to build a strong and vibrant economy through diversity. And again, it's the front part. And then on the back portion, it talks about, and I'll just paraphrase, the Montgomery County's Minority Business Program attracts and assists certified minority firms in gaining access to prime and subcontracting opportunities with government, county government agencies. They talk about the certification process. They have the minority certification accepted by the various 6 agencies, some of which we talked about today. It talks about, because a lot of people really don't understand, say, well, why is it important to work with, minority disadvantaged businesses? A lot of people may not be familiar. I'm talking about seasoned businesses. They say, well, what's that all about? So when I looked at that question and I pulled this up, and I realized that Frederick County, they're working towards it, and they have been working towards it. Sometimes we just need to underscore the importance of the minority business and disadvantaged business entrepreneurship, and do it in a way that is part of the strategic communication, whether it's a brochure or we have it on a website. I remember a long time ago, I don't know if it's still on the Frederick County Public Channel, they used to have a listing of the proposals. I can't remember, I think it was Channel 19 a long time ago. And then as you're sitting home, and you say, oh, here's an upcoming bid opportunity. Fast forward, we have websites, we have information to hard copy information, but I just want to share this with you because this information, I just typed it in probably an hour before I left Fort Detrick, and just to benchmark. And then I also went outside of the state of Maryland. I'm a proud resident of Newark, New Jersey. I'm an inner city guy, so I'm not afraid to say that. And I actually went into Newark, New Jersey. I said, let's type in. I have some information here also to share, just to benchmark, because they're doing a lot with a lot of other cities are doing. Very diverse. They know they have businesses out there that can contribute. They don't allow, as far as the boundaries of the state, prevent them from going after other contracts outside of, as far as the county or outside the state. You'd be surprised. So I think that in terms of answering the question, there are certainly opportunities out there. Small businesses should not feel discouraged. It's never a guarantee. I know a lot of people will say, well, you say it all the time, but there's an opportunity to learn. And what I like to leave with is that when you compete, as an example, when you compete for a requirement and you don't win, typically you say, well, that's it. So what I'm asking, and what the small business office is asking that you do, take a deep breath, go back telephonically, in person, schedule an appointment, 15-minute appointment, to talk with the contracting officer, and kindly request we call it a technical debriefing, and find out where you may have fell short, if you will. And sometimes they may say, well, we can send you a letter. Accept that letter kindly, say thank you very much. So all that information is important, because if you don't ask the question, if you say, well, I didn't win, and thinking that, well, it's no room for me, you may miss out on a key component of information that may help you. At the same token, if you win, you're happy, you got a contract, you have several contracts, go back to the contracting officer and kindly request a technical debriefing. Win or lose, you will be surprised what you may learn, because that's what it's all about. It's a learning process. It's evolving. So you say, oh, we won. We don't need to go back and ask any questions, but there might be something in there that might help you for a future procurement. Or you might find something and say, well, you were rated high, and these areas right here, and this one right here, and he said, oh, we didn't answer that correctly. We misunderstood the question. So I say all that, and I try to underscore those points because it's an evolving process. You have to, they call it lifelong learning. In academia, it's the same thing as a business person. You cannot, the days of being like, I'm a business owner and I operate out of my house, or I have an office here downtown. Take the time to go back and ask questions. maintain those open relationships with the individuals that are maybe have a seat at the table, reviewing your packet, your capability statement, reviewing your request for information or proposals. Be neat, clean, and professional. Again, be passionate, and if you're emotional, understand. But in today's environment, with everything being scrutinized, just be mindful of that. And if you're the boss or you're the CEO and you're like a type of personality, or your temperament maybe not working one day, to sit down across somebody, say, you know what, I'm the boss, but I'm gonna have my second in charge, as an example. I'm gonna have him or her attend maybe in my absence, and they can basically glean some better information, and I can not be too emotionally attached as far as to some information. So be receptive to feedback. Continue to work towards actively participating, especially in those local events. And here in the DC, in the National Capital Region in the state of Maryland, there's a lot of events up and down 270. Some of them there's a modest cost associated with registration, but that's part of the investment. And I think if you do that and look at other information, I think you'll be successful.
Well, I think I mentioned that I served as a county commissioner of Queen Anne's. When I went over there, it's really two counties. You've got Kent Island, and most of those folks commute across the bridge to go to work. Their bedroom, they're not really involved in the county. They're there. It's less expensive. It's nice. It's quiet. Good school system. And then you have the northern part of the county where folks have been there for generations. And they really couldn't have anything more in common except one thing. They didn't want anybody else to move there. The folks who've been there for generations and the folks who just showed up. And I say that to say that change is difficult. Mm-hmm. And the reason why change is difficult is people see change initially as something being taken away. They don't see change as an enhancement, adding, making us better. They always see it as, I'm losing something that I always had. I've got a dear friend who's still in boxing. I used to box, and I don't know anything about boxing anymore. I used to say, well, there are no more great champions. When I grew up, there was Muhammad Ali, there was Joe Frazier, there was all these great champions. And you know what he said? Gosh, the guys, it's like football. The guys are bigger, stronger, faster, better, trained quicker. They're better. But we always want to believe that in that time when you first started listening to music. See, my favorite music is still the 70s because that was my first music. And so when I hear that, I got the memories, I got the nostalgia. That doesn't mean that the music they're not making now isn't good. That's me being trapped in the past and being scared of what the future can bring. And I understand it can be scary and it can be difficult. So I think about growing up in Montgomery County, and the only reason why you came to Frederick is because they ran out of whatever football equipment you needed at the mall, and you had to get on 270 up to Francis Scott Key to get a mouthpiece because they were all out at Lake Forest. And you got back on the highway and came back. So about 10 years ago, I was working with the city and the county on their clean energy loan program. And it's my first time coming to Frederick since going to Francis Scott Key Mall in the dark, because it was evening and practice starts the next day. And it was early spring in 2010, and I'm walking along this river and the cherry blossoms from dogwood blooming, and I'm looking at downtown Frederick, and I'm thinking, this is not your father's Frederick. This Frederick is thriving, and it has changed, and it's better. Now, there's still going to be some people that are nostalgic for the old days. There's always going to be nostalgia for the old days. This isn't the Frederick that I grew up in. This isn't the Frederick that I want. That's normal. That's normal for most people. But the fact of the matter is, why are you going to Frederick? That's what folks would say in the past. Now, I've had friends who move here. I've had friends start businesses here. Hell, I'm here tonight. Told everybody, Baltimore, I'm going to Frederick. When you going to Frederick? I'm going to Frederick. Because when you look at Frederick, if you knew Frederick 20 years ago, 30 years ago, God forbid 50 years ago, you would have never dreamed that it would look like this. I certainly never would have. And this is amazing. It's beautiful. And is now a destination. And not only in terms of talking about attracting small businesses, hey, you want to get those folks from Montgomery County and Prince George's County and say, hey, look, we got some good commercial office space here. We got some opportunities. We got not just public sector stuff. We got private sector things happening. You want to lure businesses here. You want to lure people here. And again, I get it. Change is scary. But when you look at what Frederick looks like now versus what it looks like 20 years ago, it's burgeoning on a national model. It really is poised to be a national model of this wonderful little small community that is a commute from Washington D.C. and a commute to Baltimore, and you ain't got to pay Montgomery County, Howard County prices. As a business owner and as a resident. Okay, Baltimore says it all the time. Hey, move to Baltimore, get on the MARC train to D.C. That's much better than paying property taxes in Washington, D.C. and paying for a home in D.C. So Frederick is uniquely poised to do some great things, and as opposed to being too cautious, too scared, embrace it. You can look at the last 20 years and see, you guys have done it. You've made the right decisions, and it's worked out well for you. There's been no downside to it. So I'll leave you with this. When I think about that, it must have been about 2 months ago. I was mentioning it outside. I heard a professor, and he was talking about Birmingham, Alabama. And he said, Birmingham, Alabama could have been Atlanta. It chose not to be. It chose not to be. Atlanta decided to move forward. Atlanta decided to be the city too busy to hate. Atlanta decided to be an international hub, not just an international hub, the international hub in the South. And African Americans, white Americans, women, Asian Americans, Latino have thrived on. That city has been flourishing for almost 50 years because they decided to go forward and not stay where they were. Birmingham, to a certain extent, stayed where it was. And if they ain't buying Bethlehem steel anymore, they're not buying Birmingham steel. So don't be Birmingham.
Thank you, sir.
Be Atlanta.
Thank
you.
I'm in. So I'm going to go over quickly some process. And while I'm doing that, I want to encourage anyone who's here tonight, if you'd like to speak, I do have to ask that you come to the podium. And it's not, we're talking about barriers, not meant to create barriers. It's actually to open things up for the folks that are watching from at home. So if you could, if you're moved this evening to share any feedback or you have some questions that you'd like to ask our experts, if you could approach the panel. The purpose, one of the sort of reasons for this evening is to gather information. It's important that folks understand, both watching at home and here this evening, that we are doing a lot of talking right now, and we are doing a lot of analysis, and that sort of stems from when we were created as a panel and we were sort of stood up, from the advocacy from folks like Willie and, of course, our newly elected alderman here to my left. Our charge has been to sort of create a program from scratch. The legislation needed to be dusted off and certainly stood up, and the panel is new, but we don't currently make an investment as a city into any sort of program. So that's part of what you're seeing here tonight, is that we're trying to learn from other folks to begin to advocate for investment and what that program should look like moving forward. And so I do want to compliment the city. The mayor and the Board of Aldermen did recently make an investment in procurement software, and we've seen sort of some new effort, engagement, and tracking some of these data points that we've been looking to better understand. But as we move forward, our effort here is to create reporting, feedback, present that to the mayor and board in a format that mirrors an ongoing discussion that mirrors the budget cycle. So to be completely candid, one of the things that we're trying to understand and to map out is, what are we asking for as a panel? What do we feel that the city of Frederick needs in order to have a successful, thriving program that does some of the things that we've talked about this evening? So you can expect there's going to be an interim report that we create and publish. We will present that at the Mayor and Board of Aldermen meeting. All of this is online, and we have excellent minutes, in part due to our excellent support from city staff. Kim Loop is here this evening, and she's done a fabulous job of keeping us on track there. So all of this information is public. Yes, Kim's awesome. And Kim does, she's like, Katie, let's go. So she's great with us. So if anyone has any questions, I'm going to open up to the panel. If there's anything left, we are at the roughly 2-hour mark here, so we do want to be respectful of folks' time, but feel free. And again, if you don't feel comfortable coming forward this evening, you can always email, and we can, of course, email folks. So
Come on down to the podium.
please.
And if we can, panelists, especially you, if we can do like a fire round, so make these questions like
Yep.
under, whatever he asks, so we can shoot a couple.
Is this on? Okay. Just a quick one. Mr. Billups, you mentioned that the city of Baltimore doesn't accept the standard MDOT certification for minority business certification. How common is that, and what's your best advice for entrepreneurs running into that, not necessarily in the city of Baltimore, but elsewhere they may find that same issue?
Well, you know, I was speaking at a vendor open house for the Port Covenant Project this morning, and a similar issue came up. Most jurisdictions require the same information for certification. We don't ask for anything the Maryland Department of Transportation doesn't ask for. They don't ask for anything that we don't ask for. We have the geographic limitation, and we have a 12-month in business limitation. But other than that, most jurisdictions are certified by the State Department of Transportation in the various states. And and they have reciprocal certification at the state level. But I would say whatever your marketplace is, the information is generally the same. If you're going to apply for Maryland Department of Transportation, if you're eligible for Baltimore City, you apply for Baltimore City. Mm-hmm. Apply for the 8A program. Apply for other state departments of transportation limitation. It doesn't guarantee you any business, but it certainly gives you a broader marketplace. So when it comes to certification, I would encourage folks to get certified wherever you are eligible, because again, they're requesting the same information. And for most jurisdictions, there's no cost.
Thank you. I do have one more, if I may. I think both of you touched on this, you and Mr. Maultsby. We increasingly can do less and less alone. You mentioned don't work by yourself. I know that there's immense value in making friends out here, partnering with other businesses who may pick up where your business leaves off. Is there some kind of a Tinder for business people looking to partner with other businesses? That is, you know, I know to me there's no substitute for making contact in person and just walking up and meeting people. But is there a way that is just blanketly more accessible to people, a little easier perhaps for somebody without the level of charisma that they may feel they need to just walk up to somebody who looks like an important person and introduce yourself and try to get something going on?
Great question. This is kind of coincidental. So if you want to look at my notes, I was writing my little summary. I want to kind of thank everyone here for inviting us and participate in this panel. Again, I'm here to listen and learn and also provide information. But one of my notes here, and I'll read it to you. For recommendations as we move forward, consider teaming arrangements, partnerships with both large and small businesses, whether here in Frederick County, mm-hmm. Montgomery County, Howard County. Be receptive to feedback. And in terms of, I am kind of old school, I hate to use that term. So there's no substitute for a face-to-face meeting, even with this new technology, because people feel that I can see a person, I can touch them, I can kind of see, get a feel for what's going on. But with that being said, I would suggest that someone, if you're a micro-entrepreneur, closely monitor the different type of business events here and around the area, and strategically identify which events you think will benefit you short term and long term. And when you attend those events, there's a little nervousness because you say I might be one of the few. I don't know. Somebody might be wearing a shirt and tie, so I should dress down. Mm-hmm. But again, I am a little old school, so you'd be surprised. So I'm here to encourage you that don't let someone that, like me, I have a shirt and tie on today, say, well, he looks a little stuffy, man. He has a bald head, and don't let that deter you. I've been to meetings and events, and again, I scan the room, and there might be somebody sitting next to me that may not resemble me in gender or ethnic background, and you just never know. So I would encourage you to go to those type of events, ask questions, introduce yourself. If you have a business card, fine. If you don't, and use that as a springboard, if you will, for further discussion. Again, there's no guarantee. Mm-hmm. And one of the other things I have here on my notes is when you are able to establish those type of teaming arrangements, share that information with the city officials and the alderman and the mayor and the county executive, because those are the good news stories that should be publicized.
Okay.
And again, it doesn't take a lot, but it's really important that you expound and publicize those good news stories and let the folks know that may not be familiar with minority business enterprise or disadvantage, because sometimes people look at those terms and that those terms say, well, what is that about? And they don't have a clue, and that's sometimes they kind of push away from that. So here's an opportunity collectively to say, you know what, how can we as small businesses, disadvantaged businesses, women-owned small businesses, veteran-owned small businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, if you're in a hub zone, how can we share our good news stories and some of the challenges that we're experiencing with the officials here, and how can we do a better job in partnering with some of the other businesses here in Frederick, the federal agencies in and around Fort Detrick, so on and so forth.
So can I just real quick, the city of Baltimore is under consent decree with this wastewater treatment plant, or waste and wastewater. They're federally mandated under court order to remedy all its wastewater treatment plants. So every other week we are letting $10 to $70 million contracts. The minority business participation is really at the subcontractor level, but you don't have a lot of minority businesses in that field. Because when you start talking about water and sewer, historically that has not been our field. Secondly, it is capital intensive. You've got to have a yard, you got to have supplies, you got to be able to finance. These are big, big projects. Most folks can't bond them. So the best hope is getting some subcontracting work. So there's a mandated mentor protege program with the Port Covington Project, but also the Department of Public Works. Most of this money is federal money. They have money and they're actually doing small business development classes for these firms. Here's the problem. So they're trying to build the capacity of MB and WB firms to take advantage of this work. The problem is, you knew the consent decree was 5 years ago it was coming. The contracts are being let. Now is not the time to build capacity. Now is not the time to form joint ventures. The contracts are already being let. Yet some of the largest construction firms in this country, they can clearly do a filtration plant on their own, are joint venturing with other large construction companies. Because 5 years ago, they got together at lunch and said, you know how much hundreds of millions of dollars is going to be spent in Baltimore City over the next 10 or 15 years on wastewater treatment plant. And guess what? Let's share the pie. Small businesses need to build capacity. And the easier way to do that, other than contract by contract and start as a subcontractor, small and grow, is joint venture. Joint venture, merge. Typically, minority businesses don't do that to the extent that non-minority businesses do. For whatever reason. I won't get into the cultural differences, but the fact of the matter is, we've got to look at, as you said, not being an army of one. It was my fatal mistake when I shouldn't say fatal, I did well, but I did everything myself. And someone told me, you'll never have $1 million firm. I said, why? You can't bill for $1 million. It's not enough time in a day. You've got to have 2 or 3 other lawyers to have $1 million in revenue. So in terms of a practical issue, the best way to meet the kind of folks that you need to meet if you want a joint venture, and same with subcontracting opportunities. Yeah, you can talk to the buyer, but you go to the pre-bid and pre-proposal conference, because that's where the prime contractors are. That's where the prime contractors looking for subs are. That's where prime contractors looking for joint venture partners are. And guess what? Everybody's not showing up to those, but they notice the ones that do. So pre-bid and pre-proposal conferences are one of the best sources of finding opportunities to joint venture and network and get subcontracting opportunities.
Well, thank you. This has been very informative. I appreciate you both sharing your experiences with us.
I have a question, and this is probably an off question, but from the city of Frederick, because that's what we're talking about as we're creating this, from the military side in your data, are there companies that you know specifically in Frederick that are minority businesses doing business on the base? Like, and how are you monitoring that? Like, do you talk with the mayor's office and economic development about, hey, bringing more folks over the gate? And
Right, we've been doing this for a while, and again, I don't want to date myself. So over the years, even with prior City of Frederick leadership, and even with Fort Detrick leadership, we've tried to do a better job of encouraging small businesses here in Frederick City, because again, there's an actual barrier, the gate, the ID card process, going to the visitors gate. So all those enhancements over the years, we have a new visitors gate off of Apostletown Pike. You know, they've invested, because one of the questions came up and said, well, you know, we got a lot of people that are interested in opportunities at Fort Detrick, but you know, we see that the gate sentries, the guards there, you got an ID, you know, and then those perceived barriers bleed into, if you will, well, there must be a secret, you know, there must be, you know, a secret handshake or a good old boy, a good old gal network. And in fact, it's not that. You know, we're trying to ease the burden in terms of the information flow, and in terms of the businesses, we have a some people used to call it a bidders list, a bidders mailing list. You know, the old days, you know, it's a piece of paper. But nowadays, everything is electronic. So there's different databases. If you go into, it's called the System for Award Management, SAM, SAM.gov.gov. You know, that's the site that the location for businesses that are interested in doing business with the government that they need to access. They can register. It's pretty straightforward, and that kind of gets you started, so to speak. And then when you meet with a procurement officer, or if you attend a particular pre-proposal conference, that's something that's going to be expected that you already have. You already have everything embedded, and then it's just a matter of you kind of listening and doing the joint ventures or the mentor protege or the teaming arrangements. And there are companies. I know Richard Griffin, and I remember a long time ago. I don't want to date myself. That when I first met him, we talked about, you know, different arrangements and things of that nature. It was never any guarantee. We made some enhancements. We're again, I was at the event, the FITSE event a couple weeks ago with General Holcomb. We have this 16th annual Smart Procurement Conference on the 29th and 30th. That was a 1 day. Now it's a 2 day. The information is on, I think, smartprocconference.com. The information is there. I actually have a couple flyers here. So to answer your question, yes, there are businesses here in Frederick County. I listen to the good, bad, and the ugly. Right. Successful businesses that say, Jerome, I just want to let you know we were successful in terms of competing first and winning a contract. I've also heard individuals say, Jerome, can I talk with you about a concern that I have, you know, in confidence? I listen attentively. I don't, you know, kind of assume that everything is good to go, and I give them my recommendation from Office of Small Business staff, because what I'm trying to do, and the office is trying to do in the Army, they want to say, yes, you know, there's opportunities, and if you just give up because you lost and then you didn't go and attend or ask or request a technical debriefing, you're just speculating. You don't really know. So that's some of the things we try to do. And again, we have, I don't have the specific numbers, but we have many successful small businesses here in the city and the county contributing to various mission requirements in around Fort Detrick, to the various agencies, federal agencies on Fort Detrick, as well as include Garrison. And I just want to, you know, underscore, when you say successful, my definition of successful is not just winning. Successful means competing. That means you win, you lose, you dust it off, you're receptive to feedback, you're neat, clean, and professional. And yes, sometimes you'll be a little emotional, but somewhere along the line, you're in this game to basically to help contribute to the overall mission within DOD. And if you just kind of say, you know what, I'm frustrated, and just throw up your hands and not come back and ask, you know, officials, procurement officials, how you can learn to increase your winning rate. You know, that's something you should always take back and put in your toolkit and say, you know what, I need to do some homework. Even though you know you have the greatest product, service, or business solution, there's always something you can learn. Okay. And again, this is joint ventures, mentor protege. There's I won't say a lot of opportunities, but there's more opportunities over the years. And in the city of Frederick, they've been very kind and genuine in partnering with, you know, officials in the leadership as far as at Fort Detrick.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we're at the 2-hour mark, so I think we're just do closing remarks. If anybody has anything they want to add, minute or less. I just did want to let everyone know, because I think it's a little bit difficult. There's a lot of information on the City of Frederick website. If you want to get to the information for our panel, it's through the government tab and then go to all boards and commissions, and you'll see the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Review Panel, and you'll see our agendas and our meeting minutes, and information about who's on the panel. Do you have anything, Alderman, before we close?
No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Billups. Thank you, Mr. Maultsby. Thank you, sir, for traveling from Baltimore. Hope it's not the last time.
Hopefully it won't be.
And thank city staff. Thank you, Kim, for all your help during this process. Thank you, Keisha, for attending. Thank you, media, audio, visual department. Thank you. This has been audio and video recorded for future viewing, and I think it's great. This has been wonderful. Thank you for those who have attended. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you, sir, for your questions, and others who have contributed. And thank you to this panel. Thank you for your attendance tonight. Thank you for your continued hard work. We've got some miles to go, but we've made some progress in kilometers. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I just wanted to say briefly, again, thank you, but I also wanted to just acknowledge that in a lot of ways, Frederick is, I'll say it, I think we're behind. And the panel is very committed through the work of the folks that are here, but also we have seen the support from our elected officials. But primarily, I would just wanted to say thank you to those who have come before, who have started businesses. I know I benefit from that. I work I work for a minority-owned business that is registered with the state of Maryland. And when my boss struck out 20 years ago, he had significant challenges. And so I think that I can speak for the folks on the panel. We are deeply committed to getting to where we need to be. And seeing some economic equity in the city of Frederick. So anybody else have any closing remarks?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.